Hey everybody, Ben Frederickson here for another episode of the Billikens Beat with Stu Durando from the Post-Dispatch, here to break down another weekend in Billikens basketball. Stu, we're talking about the first loss of the Billikens season. Not a bad loss. You go on the road for the first time all year and play a Big Ten opponent, but certainly a game that SLU hoped to win to crack that top 25 ranking. They fall on the road to Minnesota, 90-82, on a night where two of their most important scorers had a hard time finding their shot, but an incredible performance by Jordan Goodwin and a nice push by the Billikens late in the game to try to make a game out of it toward the end, but they couldn't get it done. What were your takeaways from the game? You were there in Minnesota.
Yeah, that was a game that in the past maybe really would have got away from them, and they would have ended up getting blown out. It doesn't go down as a bad loss, I don't think. It's a loss, though, so it'll be on the resume as a loss. They played three power conference teams in non-conference and come away with 2 wins, which I'd have to say ultimately was pretty successful. And you look back now at that edition of the North Carolina State game and what they did to North Carolina last night and how good they might be. And that ends up being a really, really huge addition to the schedule.
That's a great point on what NC State has done since SLU beat them. Also LSU, SLU gets that win at home. So not a bad non-conference slate. Specifically about what happened at Minnesota. It seemed like Devontae Perkins had a hard time kind of finding his shot. It seemed like Gibson Jimerson, the game kind of sped up on him. When those two guys are having a hard time scoring, it's asking a lot for this team to knock off of Minnesota.
Yeah, they just weren't getting the shots that they normally get, the looks they usually get. Gibson wasn't getting open for the threes, and he didn't make one for the first time this season. Javonte wasn't getting to the spots or getting those kind of mid-range looks that he normally gets that are open. And so there was a reliance on other people. Fred Thatch stepped up and did pretty well off the bench, and Goodwin was Goodwin as usual. Hassan French started really fast and then didn't really see the ball as much the rest of the way. And they just couldn't keep pace with a team that scored 90 points against them.
What do you make of what Jordan Goodwin is doing here? He has played well against the best opponents they've played against. Do you think Jordan Goodwin could be in the discussion if this continues for an All-American type season?
Well, his numbers are certainly pretty remarkable. You know, we always talk about what he does for a guy who's 6'3" in terms of rebounding. He's upped his scoring slightly so far over last season. He almost had a triple-double the other night against a Big Ten team. I think he had a pretty big game against LSU. He was good against North Carolina State. You just don't know if people take a player in the A-10 seriously because of, they're not playing top 25 teams night in and night out. But he is certainly as consistently good with the numbers as just about anyone in the country.
SLU will host the Kansas City Roos before starting conference play. They're almost to the end of the non-conference slate here, kind of a final tune-up game against the Roos, if you will. I wanted to ask you about the A-10. This looked like I think it still should be more than a multiple bid league, but I'll tell you what, Richmond didn't do the Billikens any favors or the A-10 by losing a home game to Hofstra. What do you make of where the conference stands as we get ready to tip off of conference play?
Maybe a notch below where people thought it was going to be at this point. The Billikens, I think, have the best non-conference resume. Richmond's loss was tough, and I think their win over Kentucky not quite as impressive as people thought when it happened. There are teams that have played better than expected, like VCU, which has been playing well, and Rhode Island has been pretty good. UMass has just started to play because of COVID, and you've got some teams that just haven't been playing. St. Bonaventure's only gotten 2 games in, and they're supposed to be a top 4 team, so we're not quite sure how they're going to be. So I guess a lot remains to be seen, and we'll start finding out when teams play each other next week. But right now, I'd have to say it's been a little bit of a disappointment overall in terms of where teams are.
Folks who picked the Billikens to win the A-10 are feeling pretty good about that pick as the tip-off of conference play nears. We'll have it all covered, including the final non-conference game for the Billikens against KC Roos. Stu, great work. Glad you got home safe from Minnesota, and we'll keep it locked here at stlt.com for all the updates on the Billikens and for next week's edition of the Billikens Beat. For Stu Durando, I'm Ben Frederickson. We will talk to you next week.